Hey all, this is Blazing Steel for Tripmine Entertainment, and today I'll be taking you through my review of Transistor for the PS4. This is a game that is designed in the stars. What is Transistor? Transistor is a turn-based hack and slash action RPG adventure game produced by Supergiant Games for the PS4 and the PC. Personally, I'm only speaking for the PS4 version here, but from what I understand, the PC version is near enough the same. And now I can hear you exclaiming already, that's a hell of a lot of genres, and it can't possibly affect that many diverse genres, but I'm telling you, it really does. And it does it with ease. It was as if they were mated to actually melded together for Transistor. Now Transistor takes the best bits from each of them and throws them together to create a wonderful experience that's as much unique as it is enjoyable. How does it look and feel? Just like its genre, Transistor is a hybrid of many different recognisable styles that Supergiant Games have used to create a game that feels fresh and new, whilst retaining familiar elements of games that we're already used to. The game is very visually stimulating, taking elements from feudal Japan, cyberpunk and anime, then throwing them all together in a massive melting pot with a drawn on paper art style. It feels like an excellent evolution on Bastion's beautiful, while simplistic art style, which is, just so you know, that's Bastion's first game. Everything from the highly detailed characters to the simple yet well-designed monsters feel as if they belong in the game. There's nothing which is out of place there. It allows you to become fully immersed in as each new area, character, skill, and enemy draws you deeper and deeper into its world and lore. It's a very refreshing feel to play a game where each element actually fits into the game, adding to it rather than detracting from it, which I find with a lot of new games, the enemies and skills actually pull you out of the experience. And there are some cutscenes in Transistor, but they're not exactly cinematic. Each time one appears, it acts as a transition from one area Cloudbank to another, providing a coherent explanation as to how your character gets around. It kind of cuts out the whole kind of black loading screen malarkey. It just replaces that with a little bit of visual magic. And now during these scenes, your character is often still in the foreground while the beautiful scenery passes behind you in the background. And there could have been some room here for cinematic cutscenes to be added, maybe something to draw you in a little bit more, as at times these 2D visuals do seem to drag. They look good, but they just feel a wee bit empty. And you keep thinking at the end of them, something will jump into view and fill the screen, giving the whole thing more meaning. But in the end, nothing ever does, and you're just wondering why the minute or two dialogue couldn't have been placed over a playable scene or spoken by the narrator. There's so many ways you could improve it, but I mean, don't get me wrong, they're not bad as such. They just feel as if they're lacking something to make them a worthwhile addition to the game. It's one of the few things that Transistor does kind of foul up a little bit. The music throughout Transistor is simply amazing. Like its predecessor Bastion, the entire game is narrated by one dude with a very endearing voice. And whether they're not speaking, your eardrums are bombarded with fantastic urban score, and each song is perfectly fitted for each scene, and it makes your experience much more greater and enjoyable by having them there. It just draws you in. So every moment of the game, there is something in your ear that just makes you want to find out more. What's the story? Your playable character is Red. She's one of the most well-known and successful singers in the entire city of Cloudbank. The game begins with a muted Red finding her companion murdered, and a spirit has become part of the Transistor. This is a magical science sword that exists as Red's main weapon and part of the soul gem for collecting the souls of the dead citizens of Cloudbank who have fallen foul to the monsters created by the villainous Camerata and their creations that are slowly consuming the city. And Transistor doesn't tell you much about the story up front. It favours little hints given out through the environment, dialogue and other features, letting the player figure things out on their own, rather than holding the player's hand and forcing it down their throats. Little bits about the plot can be found each time you rescue a person's soul and absorb it into the Transistor. And each person, once they're absorbed, becomes a new skill for you to use, and it also reveals a snippet about the city of Cloudbank, the Camerata, or even potentially Red herself. It gives you just everything about the story rolled into parts of the gameplay. Transistor then seamlessly weaves these story elements into the gameplay by rewarding them with a snippet of history when the player uses the soul to personalise their attacks. It's rewarding and makes you want to try out new combinations just so you can learn more about the story. The only part where Transistor falls down is that some of the information is fairly fundamental to the plot, and it's extremely easy to kind of overlook it. If people don't use a variety of the powers, then they might find the plot confusing, and they'll be missing a healthy dose of the core content and the lore. And while I applaud how the information is found and how it's actually married to the gameplay, I think some of the more vital information should have been given rather than left to the player to unlock. One of the main motivations for the Camerata, the big villains, I found out when I used a specific combination of one character with another, and both of their revealed arcs told me some vital information, and if I hadn't used that because I wanted to find out more about them, I would have missed it entirely, which would have been a travesty and would have made my opinion of the story much less than what it is. But it's definitely a good effort. It's something which I feel more games should have tried to go along this path of bringing the gameplay and the story together rather than having them opposing each other. How does it actually play? Transistor's combat is incredibly fun and rewarding. It's a combination of traditional hack and slash mechanics spliced up with a huge range of powers and the Fallout series VAT system. Now, like the Fallout's VAT system, you're never forced to use them with the time stopping ability. You're more than welcome to just use the moves one after another manually, but you'll be finding it pretty damn hard to actually progress without using it. By freezing time, you can move yourself into position and combine attacks to cause some devastating damage. And it's really rewarding, as each successful combination seems to dispense the enemies with greater and greater ease. It's something which you'll actually feel like your new combos are actually pulling off a greater impact. Now, of these moves, there are 16 unique ones called functions. Now, each function has a core ability, a secondary ability, and a passive ability. So there's 3 of them rolled into one, but they are different depending on how you allocate them. Because Transistor allows you to have up to 4 functions equipped, and then the game allows you to augment each function with up to 2 other functions, which then dramatically alter the attack. So it's like taking a big punch and adding maybe a kick to it. It's just kind of a combination that then alters the original attack. And on top of this, you can actually add up to 2 passive abilities, which can augment it even further, to the point that they even resemble their original counterparts. And it's just highly satisfying to see I don't want to say hundreds, because it's not hundreds, but it feels like there's just a huge number of combinations there. And the amount of customization here is absolutely staggering, as each function really does change with each augmentation, which you've been experimenting throughout the entire game to find out which combo is tailored and is easiest for you to pull off. And throughout my playthrough, I found that nearly all the functions and the combinations are fairly balanced, and there are only a few combinations that really give you that overpowered edge. And they're only really available at such a late point in the game where the enemies actually have scaled up to kind of combat this. At the end of the day, they don't just about make it. The combos just outpace the enemies, but you can really only see the proper disparity in the power combinations on the New Game Plus modes, where you then have everything unlocked already, and obviously the enemies, while slightly more powerful, but at this point you've worked out how to combination against them, like how to work out the counter combo, and it takes away some of the difficulty there. And if the game's starting to sound a wee bit too easy at this point, Transistor does offer something for you crazy people out there who want something to be very difficult. The game has something which it calls limiters. Now, these limiters exist to make your life harder in exchange for more experience. And most of the time these trade-offs actually work in your favour, creating a challenge for you whilst rewarding you actually for it. However, you are actually given the opportunity to put as many limiters on in one go as you want, and you can, and will if you want the platinum, play with all the limiters on at once. Now, at this point, the game's more akin to having a fight with a wall. A spiked wall. A spiked wall engulfed in flames. A spiked wall engulfed in flames while you're handcuffed to a monkey. You gotta take my word for it. When you put those limiters on, it just dramatically changes the feel of the game. And you don't have to put these limiters on, and it does give you that level of challenge, but it's often you don't realize what the level of challenge is until you whack a limiter on, then you go into the battle and you think, oh god, that was a terrible, terrible mistake. But it is a good way of increasing the difficulty without having just a traditional easy, hard, medium difficulty setting. It's, quite a refreshing concept. It's something which they have taken from Bastion and again just built on it a little bit. And when you actually think about the enemies, there isn't too much to say about them. They are well designed, varied, and they do scale well to your character, but they ain't nothing groundbreaking. And towards the end, once you've learned what function must counter the enemies, they can become a little bit tedious, where some of the more frustrating enemies are just used again and again and again, and you have to dole out the same combos to defeat them. I mean, thankfully the game does spice up the road to enemies enough, and often it alters the environments to combat this, so you do very rarely experience the tedium, but it is possible. Overall, the combat is solid and enjoyable, and it's a much welcome improvement over Bastion's simple mechanics. Now on to trophies. Transistor doesn't have trophies that you'll easily miss, and it doesn't really have too many hard trophies. However, in saying that, they do still feel rewarding. It does feel like you have to actually earn the trophies, and they're not just handed out to you like candy. 2 playthroughs are definitely required to get everything, but you shouldn't need a third as long as you're accessing all the content and kind of going for the completionist angle there. I'd say the average time to play it's probably around 10 to 12 hours, because it's not a hugely long game. It's maybe 8 at a push if you really go for it. I mean, at the time of releasing this video, I have platted Transistor. It took me roughly around 12 hours. Now, is the game actually any good? You know what? It's damned good. This is one of my favourite games to date, and it's not perfect, but there are no glaring problems either with the game, and it excels in most categories. If you're a lover of the steampunk genre, or if you like artistic games, or if you're just a fan of simple strategy games, you should definitely give this one a look. And if you liked Supergiant's first game Bastion, you'll definitely fall in love with Transistor, as it's following the same kind of beats there with the story and the narration. However, if you played Bastion, you thought the one thing that was lacking was combat, switching games now. Transistor actually takes what was lacking in the Bastion's combat system, builds on it, improves it, and makes it worthwhile. This game goes very highly recommended. What you've got to remember as well is this is only Supergiant's second game. It's amazing what production values and graphics and story they can come up with a game that's so early into the company's creation. This is definitely going to be a developer to watch in the future. Overall, I'd probably give it a 9 and 9.5 out of 10. It's definitely a game, an indie game to aim for, because you're not really putting this game up against other AAA games, but the price point you're at, when you compare it to some of the other indie games in the market, it definitely is miles above it. Well, thanks for listening to the review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it kind of gives you an idea of what you're kind of expecting from it, and hopefully then now you know if you want to buy it or not. If you liked it, please subscribe down below, and you can find more videos like this one. You'll also be able to visit my own channel, which has got some other bits of content, some Let's Plays, or if you fancy a bit more podcast setting, you can find more podcasts right here on the Tripmine channel. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. See you later.